You can't even prep the food right. Bring it to me now. You're making Mom mad. My husband swore and left the kitchen with an extra bottle of wine. Of course, he never tried to help me. I quietly started to clean up the broken dishes. I hated it. Why do I always have to do this? What's wrong? At that moment, my father-in-law, Tyler, who had apparently come late, showed up in the kitchen, probably having heard the sound of broken dishes. He looked surprised to see so many lined up in the kitchen. Wow, did you do all this yourself, Katie? It happens all the time, I told him in a self-mocking tone of resignation. Then I gathered up the pieces of plates and stood up. Seeing me like that, my father-in-law was speechless. His surprised expression turned into an angry one, seeing the miserable look on my face. Tyler said, I'm going to ask my wife what's going on. You should come too. After saying this, my father-in-law took me with him to the living room. My name is Katie Smith, and I am 32 years old. I have been married to my husband, Harry, who is 3 years older than me, for almost a year now. I had been an outpatient nurse at a small pediatric clinic before we got married, but I recently moved to a general hospital in the same city to improve my skills. I think 1 year of marriage still qualifies us as newlyweds. But my husband and I have been living with my mother-in-law since the first day we got married. My husband wanted to move in with his mother because he was worried about her being left alone because his father was working out of town. At first, I thought it would be comforting. I thought we'd help and support each other during busy times. But I soon came to realize that I was wrong. Katie, you are terrible! It was my first night shift after changing jobs. I worked between midnight and 8:30 a.m., which I wasn't used to. I came home exhausted and dizzy. Then I was greeted by a rude comment from my mother-in-law. It was 9 in the morning. My husband was at work. Usually at that time, our neighbors passed by our house. Whether or not she realized this, she cornered me and shouted in a loud voice, easily heard from outside. Miley said, "You didn't even make me breakfast! What are you thinking?" What breakfast? I was confused. I had prepared breakfast for them last night before going to work, so I assumed my husband ate all of it. When I pointed this out, she still didn't stop. I rubbed my sleepy eyes and decided to make breakfast again for her. Miley said, "You're inflexible and exhausting." I finished making her breakfast, and she didn't even say thank you. Instead, she said, "It's too salty." She took one bite and complained, but I was sleepy and foggy-headed, so I tried to ignore her complaints and left the room to go to bed as soon as possible, but she stopped me. "Hey, Katie, where are you going? You still have dishes to clean up." "I'm sorry, Miley. I just finished my shift. Could you please wash them?" "Huh? What are you talking about? Cleaning up is a part of cooking, isn't it? I left the cleaning and laundry for you to do. So if you're gonna take a break, can you take care of those things first?" "Well, it'll have to wait until I get some rest." "What do you mean? You're Harry's wife, right? And you don't have a child to keep you busy, so..." Okay. She apparently wasn't gonna let me rest. I hoisted myself up and did the chores my mother-in-law ordered me to do. She has recently been saying, "When you have a child, leave the housework to me," which is a not-so-subtle hint for me to hurry and have a child. My husband is an only child, so she's even more focused on me giving her grandchildren. Miley said, "I heard that my friend's daughter-in-law and son conceived on their honeymoon. Also, another friend's daughter-in-law is already a mother of 3. I'm so jealous. I can't wait to meet my grandchildren." I actually do want to have a baby as soon as possible. At least I wouldn't have to worry about Miley hounding me. But I don't have a baby yet. This past year, I've been taking care of my body, taking supplements, and I even visited a shrine that is blessed with the power of fertility. I've tried everything, but I still can't get pregnant. When I finally finished my work, I turned to my mother-in-law to tell her that I was going to take a break. But before I could open my mouth, she smiled and said, "Thank you for your hard work, but it's almost lunchtime. Pasta is fine for me." I finally was able to go to bed at noon. "Hey, honey, about the fertility treatment. The doctor at the clinic said they want us to see the doctor together to make a treatment plan. So could you free up your Saturday morning?" One rare evening when our schedules didn't overlap, I told my husband about what happened at the fertility clinic. It was just my first visit, so I only had to submit my basal body temperature chart, have blood drawn, and undergo a light medical interview. My husband said, "What? What's that? I've never heard of that before." "You told me to go to the hospital since I was worried about not being able to have children." "I did say that, but why do I have to go?" I understood his doubts. Although obstetrics and gynecology is a different field, in the beginning, I also had assumed that fertility treatment was something just for women. That's why I went to the clinic alone for my first visit. But then the doctor in charge told me that cooperation of both the husband and wife is essential in the treatment. The doctor explained to me that in order to conceive, the normal reproductive function of the husband is important as well as the wife's eggs. They check the amount and concentration of semen, motility rate, sperm morphology, and other parameters. By doing so, abnormalities such as azoospermia can be detected. Depending on the results, the subsequent treatment plan may be affected. In other words, the husband's semen test is also quite important for fertility treatment. I want you to know the treatment plan too. "Why don't you do that alone? It's none of my business." "That's not true. It's about you and me, isn't it? Every time I see Miley, she asks me why we don't have children yet." "Don't speak ill of my mother. It's your fault because you're infertile. Get it fixed." "I need your cooperation to do that. Besides checking fallopian tubes and follicles, a sperm analysis is essential for fertility testing." "I'm healthy and there's no problem. We have a good marriage and I have plenty of sperm. There's no need for a semen test." "Then prove it to me." "Well, how would you like it if your colleagues saw you in a place like that?" "Are you trying to humiliate me? Anyway, I'm definitely not going." Did I ask him in the wrong way? My husband seemed to be offended, and as if to say, "I'm done talking about this," he pulled the covers over his head and began to snore loudly. I looked down at him and sighed deeply. It's not uncommon for nurses to work night shifts. The schedules are different depending on the institution, but my new employer basically has a 3-shift system. In addition to the day shift, there are 4 or 5 late night shifts a month, and about 8 night shifts a month if you include the semi-night shift. But the problem wasn't my irregular work schedule. It's the constant orders my mother-in-law gives me when I'm at home. Nurses are supposed to have the benefit of being exempt from day shifts after night shifts, but since I had to take care of the house, I practically never had a day off. If I had known this is what it would be like, I never would have changed jobs. I'd been married to her son for about a year when my mother-in-law's criticism started getting worse and worse. It's hard to believe compared to how she is now, but when we first got married, she never pushed me or ordered me to do housework. I wonder if it was because I was having fertility issues. I had been dealing with this for a little over 6 months. I was healthy and kind of thick when we first got married, and then I became skin and bones. I looked sickly, but somehow my mother-in-law and husband didn't seem to notice. Maybe it was because we saw each other every day and it was hard to see the difference. One summer day, my husband happily came to me with an idea. "We are going to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday this coming Sunday. She is very excited about inviting a lot of friends, so I need you to take care of the preparations." He then gave me a piece of paper. It had a list of names and contact info for the guests and a detailed menu all in Miley's handwriting. She wrote down the tableware and the brand of liquor she wanted. She even wrote the order she wanted the food to be served. I was surprised by the number of guests and the schedule. Of course, Tyler, my father-in-law's name, was on the list, but, surprised, I said, 10 people? This much food for only 10 people? And it's Sunday. It would be right after my late shift. My husband said, "My mother said that day was good for her. You'll be fine. You're always up till past noon anyway. This celebration will be held at noon, so it won't be a problem." He left the room, leaving me stunned. I doubt either of you will help me. I knew they wouldn't. It was the morning of my mother-in-law's 60th birthday celebration. As usual, I came home from a late night shift feeling woozy and did what my mother-in-law asked me to do. I had done the laundry and cleaning last night, which is good, but my husband ate some of the food that I had bought in advance, so I had to go shopping again. Thanks to him, before I could start cooking the main course, the guests started arriving at the house one after another. While my well-dressed mother-in-law showed the guests around, I hurriedly prepared drinks, some dishes, and glasses. While they were enjoying those, I tried to get the main course ready in time. I was already running out of time, but I kept working hard to get everything ready. But it wasn't easy to make up the time. "What are you doing, Katie? You're late!" my husband shouted, probably at the request of his mom. Just as I was almost ready to finish the all-important main course, my husband stomped into the kitchen. His brow wrinkled when he saw the unfinished food. "You can't even prep the food right. Bring me the food now. You're making Mom mad." My husband swore and left the kitchen with an extra bottle of wine. At that moment, some of the plates that had been stacked on top of each other collapsed and fell off the kitchen table, shattering into pieces. I was terrified because they were my mother-in-law's favorite plates. My husband's face was calm. "That's your fault. You shouldn't have stacked them up like that." That was all Harry said. Then he left the kitchen. Of course, he didn't even try to help me. I crouched down on the floor and silently began to clean up the broken dishes. I hated it. Why do I always have to be the one to do everything? "What's wrong?" I heard a gentle voice. I turned around, surprised to see Tyler, my father-in-law, standing at the kitchen door with a large package. Apparently, he had heard the sound of broken dishes. "Are you hurt?" His genuine concern made me want to cry. Come to think of it, it had been a long time since I heard such kind words from someone in this house. After all, I had not seen Tyler since New Year's Day. He came over to my side of the table and helped me gather the shattered dishes. Then he looked in amazement at all the food and dishes laid out in the kitchen. "Wow, did you do all this yourself, Katie?" He looked around to see if someone else had been helping me prep for the party. But nobody was there. I had no help. "It happens all the time," I told him in a self-mocking tone of resignation. Then I gathered up the pieces of dishes and stood up. He was speechless. I looked a lot different from the last time he saw me, clearly struggling. My hair was thin and disheveled, and my skin looked bad with dark circles under my eyes. I wasn't the lively person I was back then. Looking at the piles of food in front of me, he seemed to start to understand the situation. His surprised expression turned into an angry one, seeing the miserable look on my face. "I'm going to ask my wife what's going on. You should come too." After saying this in a low voice that I had never heard before, Tyler started to leave the kitchen, but I stopped him. "I haven't done the dishes yet." Tyler said, "You don't have to." I resisted, but he comforted me and took me with him to the living room. My mother-in-law was chatting with the guests and pouring a glass of wine that my husband had brought. "Hey, Katie, how long are you going to make me wait?" "Oh, you finally showed up. Everyone, this is my husband. He's been working out of town for a while and came home just for me." When my mother-in-law introduced Tyler, the guests greeted him with nods and smiles. Tyler smiled and nodded back. "Thank you very much for coming today. I'm Tyler, her husband. My foolish wife is grateful for your hospitality." "Oh my God, you called me a foolish wife. This is my birthday." "You are foolish. Truly." "What?" That one word changed the harmonious atmosphere to awkward and silent. Tyler made me stand with him, even though I was subtly hiding behind him. He faced the guests. "I would like to introduce you to my son's wife, Katie." Miley said, "Hey, honey, Katie is busy preparing." He glared at her, and she swallowed her words. "A year and a half ago, she married my son. She was a cheerful, smiling young lady, and I was convinced that her and my son would have a bright future. But how does she look now? She didn't look so miserable 6 months ago. Some of the guests started to murmur, saying I didn't look anything like my photos and that I'm way too skinny. Tyler turned to Miley. Why has she changed so much? Miley said, Well, I don't know. Probably because work is too hard. You know, I told you on the phone that she changed hospitals and has been on the night shift since the start of the year. Okay, so are all of Katie's colleagues suffering like that? If so, it's a clear violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. I'll have to contact the union. No, that's not... Are you still acting like you don't know anything? I just heard that you've been hard on Katie and haven't been giving her any time to rest. I heard that she worked a late night shift earlier. Then you told her to cook all of that by herself after no sleep and a long shift? That's right, I had told Tyler everything. I told him that for the past 6 months I had been treated like a housekeeper without a day off. When Miley turned her head away, unable to argue with him, Tyler glared at my husband. You too, Harry. You knew Katie has been going through it, so why haven't you done anything? That's because it's between Katie and Mom. I had nothing to do with it. What did you vow at the wedding? Didn't you swear to protect and support her, to make her happy? Does she look happy to you? Well, of course, there were times that I thought it was a little much, but Mom said it was normal for a woman without a child to do all this. As a husband, you should put your partner before your mother. Have you already forgotten how your first marriage ended because you pushed her too? My husband's face turned red. I looked at him, jaw dropped. I already knew that my husband had gotten divorced before we got married, but I didn't know that his ex-wife had been treated badly like I was. It all came together in my head. Let me tell you something. This is the kind of work she should be doing as a woman without kids. It's been 1.5 years since they got married, and she still can't have a baby. She's an unfit wife. Even if she were infertile, you can't blame her for that. You're just taking it out on her. What? How dare you? You've been gone for so long. What do you know about it? You have no idea. Everyone brags about their grandchildren, and I'm the only one who doesn't have any. I'm lonely. I want a grandchild as soon as possible. When Miley shouted this, she broke down in tears. I felt a little sorry for her, but it didn't take away from the fact that she had caused me so much mental and physical pain over the last 6 months, especially since she had treated Harry's ex-wife badly too. I don't think you'll be getting any grandchildren for a long time. I told her firmly and held out a few pieces of paper that I had taken from my room. They were the results of the tests I took at the fertility clinic. Blood tests, AMH, uterine and fallopian tube drainage tests, anti-sperm antibody tests. Everything was fine. My body is normal. If the situation was the same with his ex-wife, can't you guess what's wrong? The problem is with Harry. Huh? You had a hunch, didn't you? That's why you didn't want to have the test done. And yet, instead of protecting me, you treated me like a housekeeper like your mother does. I did love you, so I thought I could keep the test results to myself. But you yelled at me again and wouldn't even help me. Also, apparently you did terrible things to your ex-wife too, so I just don't care anymore. Wait a minute. It's not true. I can't be infertile, right? Well, why don't you get a proper examination? But regardless of the results, it's not important to me anymore. With that last comment, I turned my back on my husband, who kept shouting excuses, and my sobbing mother-in-law, and I left the living room. Just before I closed the door, I heard the faint sound of the guests leaving. Later, my husband and I officially divorced through an attorney. My husband was very insistent, but thanks to Tyler's recording of our conversation that day, it was proven that I had been emotionally abused by him and Miley over a 6-month period. Plus, my husband had a sperm analysis and found out that he had azoospermia, and my mother-in-law was furious with him. After my husband and I successfully completed our divorce proceedings, my ex-parents-in-law decided to divorce too. Tyler said, I had hoped that Harry and Miley would change their minds due to his ex-wife's case, but it didn't happen. He said that was the reason. And Tyler began to apologize to me for not understanding the situation sooner, and for not urging Harry to take the semen test before we got married. According to a rumor, my ex-mother-in-law, who was kicked out of her house, is now living with Harry in public housing in the same city, and her former friends have cut her off. Plus, the rumor of the incident spread, and now my ex-husband is shamed at work. Tyler introduced me to a man, and after 6 months of dating, I remarried. My father-in-law finds him very reliable. He is Tyler's subordinate. We are living happily together. The other day, I had a checkup with an obstetrician and found out that I'm 2 months pregnant, so I'm going to tell Tyler soon. I am planning to visit soon to tell him the news since he was our matchmaker and he saved me from my awful living situation.